Message came through on a Thursday morning just before 7. I was still in my housecoat, standing at the kitchen counter in our place in Kanata, waiting for the coffee to finish. The kind of morning where the light comes in low through the back window and everything feels quiet in a way that almost tricks you into thinking the day will be simple. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up without thinking. Plans have changed for the long weekend. Audrey and I decided it would just be the two of us at the cottage. You understand, right? You've been so tired lately. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and watched the coffee finish dripping. My wife, I'll call her my wife because that's what she still was that morning, had been planning this trip to her sister's cottage on Ratto Lake for 3 weeks. Our anniversary-long weekend. The October 1. The kind of weekend you hold on to in this country because you know what's coming after. I had cleared my schedule. I had already told my Thursday poker group I'd be away. I'd even bought a decent bottle of Cab Franc from the LCBO the week before and tucked it into the pantry. She didn't call. She texted. And the reason she gave me, "You've been so tired," was the kind of reason that isn't really a reason. It's a door closing while someone smiles at you through the gap. I'm 63 years old. I've worked 31 years as a civil engineer, mostly for the city of Ottawa, the last 12 of those as a project lead. I've rebuilt 2 kitchens, raised a son through a difficult adolescence, and driven through a February whiteout on the Trans-Canada with a busted heater because we couldn't afford to stop. I know, tired. That wasn't what this was. I poured my coffee. I sat down at the kitchen table, the one we'd bought at a place in Westboro the year we got married, solid oak, still good. I looked at the backyard. The maple was just starting to turn. Another week and it would be full red. I thought about what she wasn't saying. For about 2 years. Things with my wife had been shifting in ways I couldn't quite name. Small absences. Weekends where she came home with a vagueness about where she'd been, a new protectiveness over her phone. Her sister Audrey was real. Audrey existed. I had eaten dinner at Audrey's house a dozen times, but Audrey had also recently become very convenient. I didn't have proof of anything. I want to be clear about that. What I had was the slow accumulation of moments that don't add up the way a house settles unevenly before you see the crack in the foundation. I sat at that table for about 20 minutes. Then I got up, refilled my coffee, went to the study and started making calls. The first call was to my financial advisor, a man I've known since my 40s. We had a joint account, my wife and I, for household expenses, and we had our own separate accounts. Mine from well before the marriage, hers likewise. I had never mixed everything together. Some people thought that was cold. I thought it was honest. I asked him to walk me through where everything stood. He did. I listened carefully. The second call was to a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer, not yet, just a real estate lawyer I'd used twice before, a woman who had handled the purchase of our house and a rental property I'd sold in 2019. I asked her a question about jointly held property and what my options were if I decided to list it. She asked me a few clarifying questions. I answered them. She told me what I needed to know. The third call I almost didn't make, but I did. My son-in-law, Lapice, 34 now, lives in Calgary, works in energy sector compliance. Picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Dad, you okay?" I told him what had happened. Not all of it. Enough. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What are you going to do?" I said I wasn't sure yet, which was mostly true. He said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." That was enough for now. I spent the rest of that Thursday doing ordinary things. I took a walk along the Ratto River pathway, the stretch near Mooney's Bay where I used to run in my 50s before my knee started complaining. The geese were restless, moving in low formations over the water. October in Ottawa has a particular quality. The cold is coming, but it hasn't arrived, and there's something in the air that feels like held breath. I thought about 31 years of working for the city. about the pension I'd been contributing to since I was 32, about the house on Clover Avenue that I had put the down payment on, that I had managed the renovation loans for, that I had repainted twice and re-roofed once, but the way my name was the primary name on most of the documents that mattered. I thought about the cab franc in the pantry. I decided I would open it that night, alone, with whatever was left in the fridge. On Friday morning, she sent another text, having a great time. Weather is beautiful up here. Hope you're doing okay. I read it. I put the phone down. I drove to my lawyer's office. We talked for an hour and a half. She had done some preliminary work after my call Thursday. She laid out what the process would look like, what joint property meant under Ontario family law, what my contributions to the mortgage over 19 years represented. I asked about timing. I asked about what needed to happen first. I want to be honest about something here. I didn't do what I did out of anger. Or at least, it wasn't anger the way people imagine anger. Heat and noise and things said that can't be unsaid. It was something quieter. It was the recognition that I had been quietly removed from my own life, one small decision at a time, and that nobody was going to restore what I'd lost by waiting. I signed the listing authorization that afternoon. My realtor, we'd used him for the rental property years ago, was efficient and straightforward. He came by on Saturday morning while she was still at the lake. He walked through the house, took his notes, said we could list by Monday if I wanted. I said yes. We agreed on the price. I signed what needed to be signed. I packed 2 bags. The things that were mine, clearly mine, my tools, my books, my good winter coat, the folder of documents from the safe in the study, my father's watch. I arranged to stay at my buddy Lorne's place in Barhaven for the short term. Lorne is divorced, has a spare room, and is the kind of man who hands you a beer without asking too many questions. I have always been grateful for friends like Lorne. I also did one more thing before I left the house for the last time that weekend. I went to the pantry, took out the cab franc, and I brought it with me. She came home Sunday evening. I wasn't there. She called me 4 times in the space of an hour. I let them go to voicemail. The 5th time I picked up, "Where are you? What's going on?" There's a realtor's lockbox on the front door. I said I listed the house. Silence. "I'm sorry, what?" "I listed the house," I said again. "You'll get the paperwork through the lawyer. Everything will be handled fairly. You can't we need to talk about this." "We could have talked," I said, "on the drive up to Rattle Lake, or before you texted me Thursday morning. We had a lot of time to talk." She said my name. She said it the way people say a name when they're trying to pull you back to somewhere you've already left. I said, "I hope you had a good weekend." And I hung up. What followed was not simple. I want to say that clearly, because I think there is a version of this story where the satisfying part is the phone call and everything after is just paperwork. That's not how it works. What followed was months of lawyers and forms and the particular exhaustion of dismantling a life that 2 people built together, even a life that had gone wrong somewhere along the way. We had a mediation session in late November at a firm on Elgin Street. Her lawyer. My lawyer. My wife, who looked thinner than I remembered and kept her eyes mostly on the table. And a man who I had suspected but never confirmed. He wasn't there in person, but his name came up anyway because these things always surface eventually. Her lawyer suggested that because I had listed the house without explicit discussion, I should be penalized in the settlement. My lawyer pointed out that under Ontario law, jointly held property could be listed by either party, that I had provided notice through proper legal channels within the required time frame, and that my financial contributions to the property over 19 years significantly exceeded hers due to our respective incomes. She laid out the numbers. It was a short conversation. The house sold in 11 days. October listings in Kanata move quickly if the price is right, and my realtor had priced it right. After the mortgage was cleared and the proceeds divided, I walked away with enough to put a solid down payment on a place of my own. I found a condo in Westboro, 2nd floor south-facing, with a balcony that looks out over a street full of old maples. By December, I had my books on the shelves and my tools in the storage locker downstairs. My son flew in from Calgary for Christmas. He slept on the pull-out. We cooked a standing rib roast on Christmas Eve and watched old hockey footage and talked until 1 in the morning. At some point, he looked around the condo, the books, the clean lines, the way I had set things up, the way I actually wanted them, and he said, "You seem okay, Dad." I said I was, and I meant it more than I would have expected. Here is what I have learned at 63, in the way that you only learn things when they cost you something. A house is not a home because of a mortgage. It's not a home because of square footage or a school district or a view from the back deck. A home is where you are not made to feel like a guest in your own life. I was not trying to punish anyone. I was not keeping score. I was settling accounts in the only way that was available to me. Quietly, legally, without shouting or scenes. I signed what needed to be signed. I moved when I needed to move. And I took the bottle of wine. The maple outside my balcony is bare now, but come spring it will come back full, and I'll be here to watch it. I pour my coffee in the mornings at the counter by the window, and the light comes in clean, and for the first time and longer than I can say, the quiet in my apartment doesn't feel like something hiding underneath it. It just feels like quiet. And that is enough. The maple outside my balcony is bare now, and some mornings I stand at the window with my coffee and just look at it. There's something about a tree in winter, stripped of everything decorative, just the bare structure of it, that I find more honest than I used to. I've thought a lot about what happened, not obsessively, but the way you think about something when it genuinely taught you something worth keeping. What I did that October weekend wasn't born out of rage. I want to be clear about that, because I think people sometimes hear a story like mine and assume the man who moves quietly must be cold. I wasn't cold. I was just done pretending that the version of my life I was being handed was the one I had agreed to. There's a difference between cruelty and clarity. I chose clarity. Here's what I know about cause and consequence. After 63 years of watching both work themselves out, the conditions we allow become the conditions we live in. My wife didn't wake up one morning and decide to send that text. It was the end of a long chain of smaller decisions, hers and mine both. She had been making choices that told me something, and I had been choosing not to see them fully. That's on me as much as it's on her. When I finally saw clearly, I acted on what I saw. That's all it was. What I had to draw on in those days wasn't courage in any dramatic sense. It was something quieter, the kind of steadiness that comes from knowing who you are well enough that you don't need someone else's permission to act like it. I had spent 31 years as an engineer. I understood load bearing. I understood what happens when you ignore a crack in the foundation long enough. I applied that same thinking to my own situation, and I stopped ignoring what I already knew. My son called me a few weeks after I moved into the condo. He said, "I didn't know you had that in you, Dad." I laughed. I told him I wasn't sure I did either until I needed to. That's the thing about the deeper parts of a person's character. They don't show themselves in easy times. They show up when something costs you something real. I'm not interested in pretending what I lost wasn't real. 19 years. A house I knew room by room, wall by wall. A version of the future I had believed in. Those things mattered, and losing them was hard in ways I didn't always let show. But what I didn't lose, what I held on to through all of it, was my sense of what I was worth and what I deserved to walk toward. That, in the end, is the only thing that actually travels with you. The maple will come back in April. It always does. And I'll be here with my coffee, watching it.